Hey there, I want to talk to you about a topic, and if you feel uncomfortable about it, you need to listen further, okay? It's about self-love or loving yourself. And I'm not just talking about the physical extremities, looking in the mirror or whatever. I'm talking about loving you as a person. And so I don't know about you, but I was raised in a culture in Australia that if you loved yourself, that was a bad thing. Oh, they love themselves. And in fact, this idea of getting even on camera and stuff like that to my age group isn't a comfortable thing, unlike younger generations who are born with the social media and stuff like that. However, it's inspired by my cousin, and we were talking about this concept of loving your neighbour as yourself in the scriptures. I'm sure even if you're not a Christian, you know that saying of Jesus, love your neighbour as yourself. And I remember my cousin, Chriso, shout out to Chriso, best dentist in Limassol. She said to me, you can't love your neighbour as yourself if you don't love yourself first. And I never thought about it in those terms. It kind of turns it around. It's like you have to know how to love yourself first before you can show love to someone else. Because if you hate yourself and you love your neighbour as yourself, you're going to be a real prick of a neighbour, right? And so when you think about it, it's really true, isn't it? I don't know if you've ever had difficult interactions with someone, maybe arguments or someone difficult, but oftentimes their reaction to you says more about what they're going through or their view of themselves than you as a person. And so I want to talk about this topic, and it's really the first steps to loving ourselves. And when I talk about loving ourselves, I don't just, as I mentioned before, not just the looking in the mirror and going, oof, but I'm talking about the person. When you make a mistake or when you do something, how do you treat yourself? Maybe you think about some past thing that you've done, a mistake in the past, or some story that you've been told or you're telling yourself, and you start to not like that person. And that's what I'm talking about. And the first step to self-love is, you might have heard me talk about being the observer, and this is observing how we talk to ourselves. I started doing this quite a while ago when I was trying to figure out the self-loathing that I used to feel from time to time, when I was trying to figure out what was blocking me, why I possibly was self-sabotaging myself. And I started to observe what I was saying to myself. And I can tell you, if someone else was talking like that to a loved one of mine, I would have vigorously defended them, right? I would have got really cranky. And so this is the first step. What are we saying to ourselves? What are we talking to ourselves? And as you know, I love writing it down. So this is one part of the journey that you can start exploring with yourself. And when you start identifying these things that you say to yourself, that's when you can say, where does that come from? What story am I telling myself? This story that am I believing about myself that makes me feel like this? And so you can start unraveling those stories, exploring them. And what you'll find, it's quite fascinating. What you'll find is this self-loathing comes from total lies you've either told yourself or you've believed about yourself. Step 2 is just a little bit deeper. I want you to take your pad out and I want you to draw a line down the middle and write down the things that you love about yourself and the things that you hate or dislike about yourself. And again, it's the same process. It's going through those things and unraveling and thinking about the feelings that it brings up and the stories you are telling yourself about it. So when you start to identify these false stories, it gives you the opportunity to actually look at them as a story and say, that is not my story anymore. In fact, the story I was telling myself about what I did when I was 5 and whatever the story is not true. And I don't accept that in my life anymore. And so what happens is these two kind of go hand in hand, right? It's like, it's a cycle of you talk to yourself in a bad way and you start to understand why you're doing that. And you can totally change the cycle. And so If this is something that makes you even feel uncomfortable thinking about, I really want you to do this exercise. Because what happens when you start loving that inner person, you start caring for that inner person, those horrible feelings don't come up anymore. And you start acting differently. And then what happens is you can show love to people in a greater capacity. And people will see the change in you, because it's easy to love people when you love yourself more. And so I'd love to hear how you went with that exercise. Thanks for listening.